Ambassador Jake Morrison sat in his chair and watched the giant screen showing the vote results. The numbers glowed in bright blue letters. 847 votes against, 1 vote for. The single vote for came from Earth. Every other species in the Galactic Council had voted no. Jake felt tired. Not the kind of tired that came from staying up late, but the deep tired that settled in your bones when you had been fighting for something good for too long. He had been Earth's voice in this giant council chamber for 12 years. Before him, other human ambassadors had served here for 18 more years. 30 years total of humans trying to help make the galaxy a better place. The proposal had been simple. The Kepler people needed new homes. Their sun was dying, and their 3 planets were getting too cold to live on. 2 million Kepler families had nowhere to go. The Council had empty worlds, good worlds that could support life. All they had to do was say yes, but they said no. Again, Jake closed his datapad slowly. The Kepler ambassador, a tall being with gray skin and sad eyes, looked at him from across the room. Her people were counting on this vote. Now they would have to keep living in the terrible camps on asteroid stations, waiting for help that might never come. "The vote is final," announced Chancellor Veltar from the center platform. The Zephyrian leader's voice echoed through the massive chamber. His tentacles moved in patterns that Jake had learned meant satisfaction. "The Council has spoken wisely. We cannot simply give away planets to every species that faces hardship." Jake stood up. The chamber was so big that his movement barely registered among the hundreds of other delegates. Most of them were already talking about the next vote, the next issue. It's the next problem to debate for months while real people suffered. Captain Lisa Carter, who had been sitting behind Jake as his military advisor, stood up too. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth Space Force, and Jake noticed how other delegates sometimes looked at her with suspicion. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were known for being too quick to fight, too willing to take risks, too emotional about helping others. Ambassador Morrison called out Senator Crickstell from the Andromedan Empire. "Will Earth be submitting another proposal for the Kepler situation?" Jake picked up his briefcase. It was an old-fashioned leather case that his grandfather had given him. Many aliens found it strange that humans still used such simple objects when they had advanced technology. But Jake liked having something solid to hold on to. "No," Jake said quietly. His voice carried well in the chamber because he had learned how to speak so everyone could hear him. "Earth will not be submitting any more proposals." The talking in the chamber got a little quieter. Some delegates turned to look at Jake. Chancellor Veltar's tentacles stopped moving for a moment. "Earth withdraws its membership from active participation in the Galactic Council," Jake continued. "We will honor our trade agreements and treaties. We will maintain diplomatic relations, but we are done trying to be the conscience of this council." Now the chamber was truly quiet. Even the translation machines seemed to pause. Chancellor Veltar's tentacles began moving again, faster now. "Ambassador Morrison, surely you do not mean. This Earth has been a valuable member of this council. Your species brings ... unique perspectives to our discussions." Jake almost smiled at that. Unique perspectives. That was the polite way of saying that humans were different, that they cared. Too much about helping others? That they suggested solutions other species found uncomfortable? "We do mean it," Jake said. "For 30 years, humans have served on this council. We helped end the Rigel Civil War by negotiating directly with both sides when everyone else said it was impossible. We stopped the genocide on Vega Prime by sending our own ships to evacuate refugees when the Council was still forming committees to study the situation. We shared our medical technology freely to stop the plague on New Titan. We built the Andromedan trade route that made many of your worlds rich. Jake looked around the chamber. Some delegates were nodding slightly. They remembered these things. Others looked uncomfortable. In every crisis, Jake continued, humans have been ready to help. We have sent our people to dangerous places. We have shared our resources. We have fought when fighting was needed and made peace when peace was possible. And what do we get? In return, he gestured at the vote display still showing those cruel numbers. We get told that we are too emotional, too quick to act, too willing to help people who are not our own species. We get outvoted when we try to save refugees from dying. Captain Lisa Carter stepped forward slightly, just enough to show that Earth's military supported their ambassador. Jake appreciated the gesture. This is not a threat, Jake said, and his voice was calm and steady. This is not anger. This is simply a choice. We choose to put our energy where it is wanted and valued. The Kepler people have asked Earth directly for help. We will give it to them. Other species who need assistance can contact us directly. But we will no longer waste time trying to convince this council to do the right thing. Senator Rexo from the Kalani Trade Union stood up. Kalani had always been friendly with humans. Ambassador Morrison, perhaps we could discuss this privately. There may be room for compromise. Jake looked at Rexo with genuine kindness. The Kalani senator was a good person who had often supported human proposals. Senator Rexo, you have been a true friend to Earth, but there's nothing to discuss. This council has made its values clear. Simply choose different values. Chancellor Veltar's tentacles were now moving in what Jake recognized as agitation. The humans are being hasty. One vote does not define our entire relationship. Perhaps. If Earth reconsidered its approach, used more diplomatic language, worked within our established processes. Our established processes, Jake repeated. Your established processes took 14 months to approve emergency food aid for the Altair colonies while children starved. Your established processes require 18 different committee approvals before medical supplies can be sent to plague worlds. Your established processes have turned this council into a debate society while real problems go unsolved. Jake walked toward the exit. Captain Carter fell into step beside him, along with the small group of human staff members who had served the council faithfully for so many years. Where will you go? Called out the vegan delegate. What will Earth do without the council? Jake paused at the large doors that led out of the chamber. We will do what we have always done. We will help people who need help. We will explore new worlds. We will make friends with species who want to be friends. We'll build things and discover things and try to make life better for everyone we can reach. He looked back one more time at the chamber where he had spent so many years. The difference is, we will do these things with people who appreciate them. As the doors closed behind the human delegation, Jake heard the chamber explode into discussion. Delegates were arguing, asking questions, demanding explanations. But Jake kept walking. Captain Carter was quiet beside him until they reached their transport ship. Sir, she said as they boarded, are you sure this is the right choice? Jake looked out the window at the massive council station with its thousands of offices and meeting rooms and diplomatic facilities. It was impressive, certainly. It represented the greatest gathering of intelligent species in the galaxy. But it had forgotten how to act, how to help, how to do anything except talk. Captain, he said, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who do not value what you offer. We gave this council 30 years of our best efforts. Now, we will give our best efforts to people who want them. The ship pulled away from the station, carrying the humans back toward Earth and toward whatever came next. Behind them, the council continued its debates, unaware that they had just lost the species that had solved more of their problems than any other member race. The humans walked away quietly. The galaxy would soon learn what that silence really meant. 6 months had passed since the humans left the Galactic Council. At first, most species barely noticed the difference. The council chambers still filled with delegates every day. The debates continued as they always had. The committees met on schedule. Everything seemed normal, but normal was becoming a problem. Captain Rex Dalton stared at the wreckage floating in space around his patrol ship. 3 more merchant vessels had been destroyed along the Andromedon trade route in the past week. The twisted metal and scattered cargo containers told the same story as the previous attacks. Pirates had struck again, and they were getting bolder. Any survivors? Rex asked his communications officer. Negative, sir. Same pattern as before. The pirates hit fast and took everything valuable, left no witnesses. Rex rubbed his tired eyes. He commanded one of the Council Defense Force patrol squadrons responsible for protecting the trade route. It was supposed to be the safest shipping lane in the galaxy. For 20 years, it had been exactly that. Now, it was becoming a graveyard. Trade route had been designed by human military engineers working with the Council's best strategic minds. But the humans had done something different. It had not just planned where to put patrol ships and checkpoints. It studied how. Pirates thought how they chose targets, what made them afraid. The route used psychological tricks as much as military ones. Certain areas were left seemingly undefended, but were actually traps. Other sections looked heavily guarded, but could be bypassed if pirates knew the right paths. The humans had created a maze that made criminals confused and scared while honest. Merchants felt safe, but the humans were gone now. The officers who understood the psychological warfare were back on Earth, or serving with human colonies. The Council had tried to maintain the route using their own methods. Those methods did not work the same way. Rex looked at his tactical display. The ships were spread thin across hundreds of cubic light years. The Council's response to the pirate attacks had been to increase patrols, but they had done it in the most obvious way possible. More ships, more checkpoints, more predictable patterns that smart pirates could easily avoid. "Sir," called his tactical officer, "we have another distress signal. Sector 47B. Rex sighed. By the time they reached Sector 47B, whatever was happening, there would be over. The pirates knew exactly how long it took Council ships to respond to emergency calls. They planned their attacks accordingly. Meanwhile, on Earth, Director Paul Bennett watched the same reports that Captain Dalton was filing. Paul ran the Terran Defense Command, the organization that had helped design the Andromedon trade route. His office walls were covered with star charts showing human colonies, trade partnerships, and defense agreements. Admiral Kate Sullivan entered, his office carrying a datapad and wearing a grim expression. Kate had served as the human military liaison to the Council for 8 years before the withdrawal. She knew better than anyone how the galactic defense systems were supposed to work. "The route is failing," she said, without sitting down. "Attacks are up 400% since we left. The Council is losing 2 merchant ships every day." Paul nodded. "Are they asking for help?" "Officially, no, but I am getting private messages from individual ship captains and trade companies. They want to know if Earth would consider providing security escorts for their convoys." Paul considered this. Earth's relationship with the Council was complicated. Now, they were not enemies, but they were not partners either. Humans had made it clear they would honor existing agreements but would not participate in Council decision-making. "What about the Kepler refugees?" Paul asked. Kate's expression brightened. "Slightly, that is actually going very well. We have settled 50,000 Kepler families on New Haven, and another 30,000 on Armstrong Colony. Their agricultural techniques are amazing. Our crop yields have increased by 60%. This was one of the unexpected benefits of humanity's withdrawal from the Council. Instead of spending their energy trying to convince the Council to help refugees, humans were simply helping refugees directly. The results were remarkable. The Kepler people were not just grateful settlers. They brought knowledge and skills that made human colonies stronger. Their biotechnology combined with human engineering in ways that benefited everyone. Children from both species played together in colonial schools, learning each other's languages and customs. "Any word from other refugee groups?" Paul asked. "Eltarian engineers have formally requested asylum," Kate replied. "Their homeworld government is collapsing, and the council refused their petition for protected status. They want to come to human space. Paul was not surprised. The Altarians were master builders who had worked closely with humans on many council projects. Their government had made the mistake of supporting human proposals too often, which made them unpopular with other council members. Approve their request, Paul said. We can use their expertise, and they deserve better than what the council is offering them. As Kate left to process the Altarian asylum request, Paul turned his attention to a more troubling report. Intelligence suggested that the Drachnary Empire was mobilizing military forces near the Centauri cluster. The Drachnary had always been aggressive, but they had been kept in check by the threat of human military intervention. Now, as humans withdrawn from council affairs, the Drachnary were testing boundaries. Paul opened a secure communication channel to Captain Lisa Carter, who was now serving as Earth's liaison to the Free Systems Alliance. The Alliance was a loose confederation of worlds that had grown tired of council bureaucracy and had formed their own cooperative agreements, Lisa Paul said, when her image appeared on his screen. What are you hearing about Drachnary movements? Lisa was aboard the FSA Phoenix, a joint defense vessel crewed by humans and several other species who had left council space. It is not good news, Paul. Our scouts report at least 12 battle groups moving toward the frontier. The Drachnary seem to think the council will not respond effectively to aggression. Will they? Lisa shook her head. The council is still forming committees to study the situation. Their military commanders are requesting permission to deploy forces, but the approval process could take months. You know how they work? Paul did. Know how they worked. During humanity's time on the council, urgent military situations had been handled through emergency protocols that humans had helped establish. But those protocols required quick decisions and unified command, structures that the council found uncomfortable. Without human pressure to streamline the decision-making process, the council had returned to its natural tendency toward endless debate and committee formation. What about refugee movements? Paul asked. People trying to get out of the potential war zone? Thousands, Lisa replied. But the council is not processing asylum requests. They claim they need to verify that the refugees are legitimate and not Drachnary spies. The verification process takes 6 months minimum. Paul felt the same frustration that had led to humanity's withdrawal from the council. While bureaucrats debated and formed committees, real people were suffering. The difference was that now humans could act directly without waiting for council approval. Send word to all human colonies and allied systems, Paul ordered. Any legitimate refugees from the Centauri region are welcome in human space. We will provide temporary housing and assistance while they establish new homes. This decision would have been impossible when humans were council members. The council had strict rules about refugee resettlement that required extensive paperwork and multiple approvals. Now, humans could simply do what they thought was right. Word of Earth's refugee policy spread quickly through the affected regions. Within days, human ships were ferrying families away from the approaching war zone. Other Free Systems Alliance members contributed ships and supplies. The operation was coordinated efficiently through the Alliance's streamlined command structure. Meanwhile, the Council continued to debate. Chancellor Veltar received daily reports about the growing crisis. Pirate attacks on the trade routes, Drachnary military movements, refugee populations with nowhere to go. Each problem seemed to be getting worse instead of better. Perhaps, suggested Senator Rexo, during one council session, we should consult with our human colleagues about these security issues. Humans chose to leave. Veltar replied with some irritation. They cannot expect to influence council policy from outside our membership. I am not suggesting they influence our policy, Rexo said carefully. I am suggesting they might have practical advice about problems they helped solve in the past. Other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew that humans had been particularly effective at handling security crises. Their military thinking was different from other species, more flexible and creative. But admitting this would be the same as admitting that the council needed help. We have our own military experts, declared the vegan representative. We do not need to rely on human aggression. Rexo wanted to point out that human aggression had prevented several wars and saved countless lives, but he knew it would not help. The Council's pride was more important than practical solutions. As the debates continued, the galaxy grew more dangerous. Pirates controlled larger sections of space every week. The Drachneri moved closer to their targets. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. What had started as isolated problems was now becoming a galaxy-wide crisis. The Andromedon trade route was completely closed to civilian traffic. Insurance companies refused to cover ships that tried to use it. The route that had once carried 40% of all galactic commerce was now known simply as the Graveyard. Commander Steve Martinez stood on the bridge of the Alliance vessel Harmony and watched another distress beacon fade from his scanner. The merchant ship had been carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies. Now it was just floating debris, and another entry in the growing list of ships that would never reach their destinations. Steve had once worn the uniform of the Council Defense Force. He had believed in their mission to protect galactic commerce and maintain peace. But after 18 months of watching the Council's response to the crisis, he had resigned his commission and joined the Free Systems Alliance. Sir called his communications officer. "We are receiving a priority message from Luna Station." Steve nodded. Luna Station had become the unofficial headquarters of the Alliance. It was where species who had grown tired of Council inefficiency came to coordinate their own solutions to galactic problems. Admiral Kate Sullivan's image appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, but determined. Behind her, Steve could see the busy activity of the Alliance Command Center. Steve, Kate said, "We have confirmation. Drachneri fleet has moved into attack position around the Centauri cluster. Our intelligence sources report they will begin their assault within 72 hours. Steve felt his stomach tighten. The Centauri cluster contained 12 inhabited worlds with a combined population of over 800 million beings. If the Drachneri conquered those worlds, they would control a strategic position that could threaten half the galaxy. "What is the Council's response?" Steve asked, though he already suspected the answer. Kate's expression grew grim. "They have scheduled an emergency session for next week. The preliminary committee will present their findings about Drachneri cultural motivations and recommend appropriate diplomatic responses." "Next week," Steve repeated. "The attack starts in 3 days, and they want to have a meeting next week." "It gets worse," Kate continued. "The Council Military Command has requested permission to deploy defensive forces. But the authorization requires approval from 7 different committees. The fastest possible approval time is 6 weeks. Steve closed his eyes for a moment. 6 weeks. The Drachneri could conquer the entire Centauri cluster and consolidate their position in 6 weeks. By the time the Council approved military action, there would be nothing left to defend. "What about the refugees?" Steve asked. "Are people evacuating?" "Some are trying," Kate replied. "But most civilian ships cannot outrun Drachneri warships. The Council Refugee Assistance Program is processing applications at the rate of about 200 per day. There are 800 million people in the cluster." Steve did the math quickly. At 200 approvals per day, it would take over 10,000 years to process all the potential refugees. The Council's bureaucracy was not just slow. It was completely inadequate for the scale of the crisis. But there was another option. Admiral Steve said, "What is the Alliance fleet status?" Kate smiled for the first time during their conversation. "We have 47 combat vessels ready for immediate deployment. The crews are mixed human, Kalani, Altarian, and Free Terran Colonial. Our logistics ships are already moving toward the cluster to begin evacuation operations." This was what made the Alliance different from the Council. When the Alliance decided to act, they acted immediately. There were no committees to consult, no lengthy approval processes, no bureaucratic delays. If something needed to be done, they did it. "Orders?" Steve asked. "Protect the evacuation ships," Kate replied. "Get as many people out as possible before the Drachneri attack begins. Cannot stop their entire fleet, but we can save lives." Steve felt a familiar surge of purpose. This was why he had left the Council military. In the Alliance, Military officers were allowed to focus on their actual mission, protecting people. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Maria Lopez sat in the Oval Office with her senior advisors. The reports from the Centauri cluster dominated the morning briefing, but they were not the only crisis demanding attention. Secretary of Defense Ryan Clark spread star charts across the conference table. Red markers indicated pirate activity, yellow showed refugee movements, and orange marked areas of political instability. The galaxy was painted in warning colors. The situation is deteriorating faster than our models predicted, Ryan said. Without the stabilizing influence of council authority, old conflicts are resurging everywhere. What about our refugee programs? Lopez asked. How are the new arrivals adapting? Secretary of State Angela Rivera smiled. Remarkably well, actually. The Kepler agricultural settlements are now producing 15% more food than they consume. They are becoming net exporters. The Altarian engineering communities have revolutionized our manufacturing processes. Productivity in human space is up 23% since the withdrawal. This was the unexpected benefit of humanity's decision to leave the Council. Instead of wasting energy trying to convince reluctant allies to help refugees, humans were simply helping refugees directly. The results were transformative. The refugee populations were not burdens on human society. They were contributors who brought unique skills and perspectives. Kepler biotechnology was producing new medicines. Altarian engineering was improving. Everything from starship design to planetary infrastructure, and the cultural exchange was enriching human colonies in ways nobody had anticipated. What about other species? Lopez asked. Are we getting requests for cooperation outside the refugee programs? Ryan nodded. The Kalani Trade Union has proposed a formal alliance. They want to coordinate their commercial shipping with our security forces. Several independent worlds are asking to join the Free Systems Alliance. And we are getting unofficial inquiries from some council member species. Unofficial inquiries? Species that are still council members, but are privately asking about alternative arrangements, Angela explained. They are frustrated with council inefficiency, but cannot publicly criticize the organization they belong to.
Ow.
Many species had joined the Council for protection and economic opportunities. But as the Council became more bureaucratic and less effective, the benefits of membership were declining while the costs remained high. What is our position on expansion? Lopez asked. We welcome any species that shares our values, Ryan replied. We are not actively recruiting. We want partners who choose to work with us because they believe in cooperation, not because they fear being left out. This philosophy was already proving successful. The Free Systems Alliance was growing steadily, but it was growing with species that genuinely wanted to participate. The result was a more cohesive and effective organization than the Council had ever been. Back in Council space, Chancellor Veltar was beginning to understand the scope of the crisis. His daily briefings painted a picture of increasing chaos across the galaxy. The Draconari were preparing to attack. Pirates controlled major shipping routes. Refugee populations were growing desperate. And traditional allies were starting to look elsewhere for leadership. Perhaps, suggested his chief advisor, we should reconsider our relationship with the humans. Veltar's tentacles writhed in agitation. The humans chose to leave. We cannot appear to be begging them to return. I am not suggesting we beg, the advisor said carefully. But perhaps we could explore limited cooperation agreements, technical consultations, information sharing, small steps that might help address the current crisis. Veltar considered this. The Council's pride had been wounded when the humans left. But pride would not stop the Drachnary fleet or clear the pirate-infested trade routes. "Contact the human embassy," he said finally. "Arrange a private meeting."
What?
Informal discussions about mutual interests. What Veltar did not know was that the human embassy had been expecting this call for months. Ambassador Jake Morrison had been replaced by Ambassador Carol Bennett, career diplomat who understood both human values and galactic politics. When the council's request arrived, Carol was ready with a response that was polite, professional, and completely unhelpful. "Earth appreciates the council's interest in renewed dialogue," her message read. "However, our current commitments to alliance partners and refugee assistance programs require all available resources. We remain open to future discussions when circumstances permit." It was diplomatic language for no. The humans were not hostile to the council, but they were not interested in returning to their old role as the council's problem solvers. The council had made their choice 2 years ago. Now, they would have to live with the consequences. As the Drachnary fleet moved closer to its targets, and the galaxy spiraled toward crisis, one thing was becoming clear to everyone. The humans had not just walked away from the council. They had walked toward something better, leaving their former allies to face the consequences of their own decisions. The Drachnary attack came exactly when Alliance intelligence had predicted. 3 battle fleets struck the Centauri cluster at dawn, local time, overwhelming the small council defense forces within hours. The orbital stations around Centauri Prime went silent one by one as Drachnary warships seized control of the system. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the battle reports streaming into Alliance Command on Luna Station. Each update brought worse news. The Council forces had been positioned according to standard defensive doctrine, but the Drachnary had studied those patterns for months. They knew exactly where Council ships would be and how they would respond. "Centauri Prime has fallen," reported Captain Lisa Carter from the bridge of the Alliance flagship Phoenix. "We are detecting massive civilian casualties. The Drachnary are not taking prisoners." Kate felt sick. Centauri Prime had been home to 50 million beings. Now it was under the control of an empire that viewed other species as either slaves or enemies. The Council's failure to act had condemned an entire world. "What about the evacuation?" Kate asked. "We managed to get 2.8 million people out before the attack began," Lisa replied. "Alliance ships are still operating in the outer systems, but we cannot reach the main population centers anymore." Kate did the math. They had saved fewer than 6% of the cluster's population. It was better than nothing, but it felt like failure. If the Council had acted when the threat was first identified, millions more could have been saved. Admiral called Communications Officer Sam Tucker. "We have an emergency transmission from the Council chambers." Kate was not surprised. Now that the crisis had become a disaster, the Council was finally ready to take action. "Put it through," Chancellor Veltar appeared on the main screen. His tentacles were moving in patterns that Kate recognized as extreme distress. Behind him, the council chamber was in chaos, with delegates shouting at each other in dozens of different languages. Admiral Sullivan Veltar said, "The council requests immediate assistance from Alliance forces. The Drachnary attack threatens the stability of the entire galaxy." Kate kept her expression neutral. "Chancellor, the Alliance is not a council organization. We do not take orders from the Galactic Council." "This is not about orders," Veltar said desperately. "This is about preventing a galactic war. The Drachnary will not stop with the Centauri cluster. They will attack other systems. Other worlds will fall." Kate knew he was right. The Drachnary had been planning this expansion for years. The Centauri cluster was just the beginning. But she also knew that the Council had created this crisis through their own inaction. "Where were you 3 months ago when we warned about Drachnary military movements?" Kate asked. "Where were you 6 months ago when we requested joint defense planning? Where were you 2 years ago when humans tried to build consensus for proactive security measures?" Terrace. Tentacles drooped. "We made mistakes. But surely those mistakes do not justify allowing millions of innocent beings to suffer." Kate felt the weight of command. She had the power to authorize Alliance military action, but that power came with responsibility. The Alliance was not like the Council. They could not spend months debating while people died. The Alliance will continue evacuation operations where possible, Kate said finally. We will defend Alliance member worlds if they are attacked. But we will not fight a war to restore Council authority over territory the Council failed to protect. You're condemning entire star systems, Veltar said. No, Kate replied. You condemned them when you chose bureaucracy over action. We are simply refusing to fix problems that you created through your own negligence. The transmission ended, leaving Kate staring at a blank screen. Around her, the Alliance Command Center continued its urgent work. Staff officers coordinated evacuation fleets, tracked enemy movements, and planned defensive strategies. But they were planning to protect Alliance worlds, not to recapture Council territory. Meanwhile on Earth, President Lopez convened an emergency cabinet meeting. The Drachnary attack had changed everything. What had been a regional crisis was now a direct threat to galactic stability. The Council is requesting military assistance, reported Secretary of Defense Ryan Clark, formally and officially. They are offering to restore human membership in exchange for immediate military intervention. Lopez leaned back in her chair. 2 years ago, such an offer would have been unthinkable. The Council had been so certain that they could manage without human involvement. Now they were desperate enough to reverse their position completely. What are they offering specifically? Lopez asked. Full restoration of human voting rights, Ryan replied. Committee memberships, military command positions. To approve the Kepler refugee settlement plan that started this whole crisis? Too little, too late, said Secretary of State Angela Rivera. The Kepler people are already settled and thriving in human space. We do not need the Council's permission to help refugees anymore. This was the fundamental change that the Council did not understand. Humanity had not just left the Council. They had built something better. The Free Systems Alliance was more effective, more responsive, and more aligned with human values than the Council had ever been. What about the moral obligation? Asked Treasury Secretary Mike Chen. People are dying. If we can help, should we not help, regardless of politics? Lopez appreciated the question. It went to the heart of what made humans different from many other species. Humans found it difficult to ignore suffering, even when that suffering was caused by other people's bad decisions. We are helping, Lopez replied. Alliance evacuation fleets have saved millions of lives. Alliance defensive forces are protecting Alliance worlds. But we are not going to restore the Council's authority by solving problems that the Council created. What if the Drachnary attack human colonies? Ryan asked. Then we defend them, Lopez said immediately. We defend them as Alliance worlds, not as Council territories. The Alliance has proven that cooperative defense works better than Council bureaucracy. The difference was crucial. If humans went to war to restore Council authority, they would be validating the same system that had failed so catastrophically. If they fought to defend Alliance principles, they would be strengthening the alternative that they had built. Back in Council space, the Drachnary advance continued. Within 48 hours of the initial attack, they had captured 4 more star systems. Their tactics were brutal but effective. They overwhelmed defensive positions quickly, then consolidated control before moving to the next target. The Council military response was exactly what everyone had expected: confused, uncoordinated, and too slow. Different Council species had different ideas about strategy. Committee meetings were held to discuss response options. Authorization. Requests moved through bureaucratic channels, while worlds fell to enemy forces. Commander Steve Martinez watched the disaster unfold from his position with the Alliance fleet. His ships were protecting refugee convoys in the outer systems, staying ahead of the Drachnary advance. They could not stop the enemy fleet, but they could save lives. Sir, reported his tactical officer, we have a Council battle group requesting permission to coordinate with our forces. Steve was not surprised. Individual Council commanders were starting to realize that their official chain of command was useless in a real crisis. They wanted to work with Alliance forces because Alliance forces actually accomplished their missions. Tell them they are welcome to coordinate, Steve replied. Out. But they follow Alliance tactical doctrine. We do not have time for committee discussions about every decision. It was a pattern that was emerging throughout the crisis zone. Council forces that wanted to be effective were essentially defecting to Alliance command structures. The official Council response remained paralyzed, but individual ships and crews We're choosing to work with organizations that could actually function. Senator Rexo of the Kalani Trade Union stood in the council chamber and watched his colleagues argue about the crisis. 3 days had passed since the Draknari attack began. 3 days of debates, speeches, and procedural motions while entire worlds disappeared under enemy occupation. We need immediate action, Rexo said during a brief pause in the arguments. Every hour we delay costs thousands of lives. The situation requires careful consideration, replied the vegan representative. We cannot simply react with violence. There must be diplomatic solutions. Rexo wanted to scream. The Draknari were not interested in diplomatic solutions. They were interested in conquest. While the council talked about diplomacy, enemy forces were enslaving populations and stripping worlds of resources. The humans offered solutions, Rexo said. For years, they proposed proactive defense measures, early warning systems, coordinated response protocols, refugee assistance programs. We rejected every proposal. The humans were too aggressive, insisted Chancellor Veltar. Their methods were incompatible with council principles. Their methods worked, Rexo shot back. When humans were active in council affairs, we did not have galactic wars. We did not have pirate-controlled trade routes. We did not have refugee crises that lasted for years. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Everyone knew that Rexo was right, but nobody wanted to admit it. The war lasted exactly 18 days, not the months or years that most galactic conflicts required, but 18 precise, devastating days that changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Phoenix and watched the last Draknari battle group retreat beyond the galactic rim. Their fleet was broken, their advance shattered, and their dreams of conquest reduced to burning wreckage scattered across a dozen star systems. Final casualty reports, Admiral, said Captain Lisa Carter, handing over a datapad. Kate read the numbers with relief. Alliance losses had been minimal. Human tactical doctrine, combined with Kalani engineering and Altarian energy systems, had created a military force more effective than anything the galaxy had seen before, and the real victory had not been military. What about the liberated? Systems? Kate asked. All Draknari forces have withdrawn, Lisa replied. The populations are free, and reconstruction efforts are already beginning. The refugee populations we evacuated are requesting permission to return to help rebuild their worlds. This was what made the Alliance different from every other galactic power. They did not conquer territory or impose their will on other species. They liberated worlds and then helped those worlds choose their own futures. Commander, yes. Steve Martinez had led the final assault on the Draknari stronghold in the Centauri system. His mixed crew of humans, Kalani, and former council military officers had worked together with a coordination that would have been impossible under council command structures. Sir, reported his communications officer, we are receiving surrender offers from the remaining Draknari outposts. They want to negotiate terms. Steve smiled grimly. The Draknari had learned what the pirates and other aggressive species were discovering. Fighting the Alliance was not like fighting the Council. Alliance forces did not follow predictable patterns or waste time with bureaucratic delays. They adapted quickly, struck decisively, and accomplished their objectives without regard for political considerations. Tell them the terms are simple, Steve said. Complete withdrawal from all occupied territories, reparations for destroyed civilian infrastructure, and no military activities within 50 light-years of Alliance space. And if they refuse, then we continue the war until they accept worse terms. The Draknari had started this conflict believing that the galaxy was weak without Council unity. They had been catastrophically wrong. The galaxy was stronger without Council bureaucracy. On Earth, President Lopez sat in the Oval Office with her cabinet, reviewing reports from the front lines. The speed of the Alliance victory had surprised even her military advisors. What they had expected to be a long, costly war had become a swift demonstration of Alliance capabilities. The Council is requesting a formal meeting, reported Secretary of State Angela Rivera. Chancellor Veltar wants to discuss new frameworks for galactic cooperation. Lopez almost laughed. New frameworks. After spending 2 years insisting that the old frameworks were superior, the Council was finally ready to admit that their system did not work. "What are they offering?" Lopez asked. "Everything," Angela replied. "Full human membership restoration, committee leadership positions, military command authority. They are willing to adopt Alliance protocols for crisis response." Secretary of Defense Ryan Clark shook his head. "They want us to fix their system from the inside, make the Council work the way the Alliance works." "Can it be done?" Lopez asked. "No," Ryan said immediately. "The Council's problems are not technical. They are cultural. The entire organization is built around the idea that discussion is more important than action. You cannot fix that with new protocols," Lopez agreed. "The Alliance worked because it brought together species that shared common values. They believed in helping others, acting quickly when action was needed, and putting results ahead of procedure. The Council would never embrace those values because most Council members did not share them." "What is our response?" Angela asked. Lopez had been thinking about this question for weeks. The Council's offer was generous, perhaps more generous than any organization had ever offered to former members. But it was also irrelevant. "We thank them for their offer," Lopez said, "but we have other commitments now." Those other commitments were transforming the galaxy. The Free Systems Alliance had grown from a loose confederation of frustrated worlds into a functioning galactic government. Alliance space was prosperous, secure, and growing rapidly as more species requested membership. The refugee populations that the Council had ignored were now productive citizens of Alliance worlds. Kepler agricultural techniques had revolutionized food production. Altarian engineering had advanced manufacturing technology by decades. And the cultural exchange was creating new art, literature, and scientific discoveries. Captain Rex Dalton, who had once patrolled the failing Andromedon trade route, now commanded security for the Alliance commercial network. The new trade routes were not just safer than the old Council routes had been. They were more efficient, more profitable, and more accessible to smaller trading companies. "Traffic report, Captain," said his navigator. "We have 847 merchant vessels in transit today. 0 pirate incidents this month." Rex nodded with satisfaction. The Alliance had not just eliminated piracy through superior military force. They had eliminated it by creating economic opportunities for people who might otherwise turn to crime. Former pirates were now working as security contractors, freight handlers, and even ship crews. It was another example of the difference between Alliance and Council approaches. The Council fought piracy by increasing patrols and building more prisons. The Alliance prevented piracy by addressing its root causes in the Council chambers. Chancellor Veltar faced the most difficult session of his long career. The Drachnary War had exposed every weakness in the Council system. Their military response had been too slow. Their coordination had been inadequate. Their decision-making process had proven completely unsuited for real crises. Worse, the Alliance had solved the problem that the Council could not solve. The same humans who had once served the Council faithfully had demonstrated that they could accomplish more outside the Council than they ever had inside it. "We must face the truth," said Senator Rexo, standing to address the chamber. "Our system failed. We rejected human cooperation, and the result has been disaster after disaster. Trade routes collapsed. Wars broke out. Millions died. And we did nothing effective to stop any of it." "The humans chose to leave," Veltar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "The humans left because we made it impossible for them to help." Rexo shot back. "Every proposal they made was rejected. Every crisis they tried to address was buried in committees. We treated their expertise like an inconvenience." Around the chamber, delegates were nodding. Even species that had opposed human proposals in the past were beginning to understand what they had lost. "Perhaps," suggested the Kalani representative, "we should consider joining the Alliance ourselves." The suggestion sent shockwaves through the chamber. If Council member species started defecting to the Alliance, the Council would cease to exist. "That would be the end of galactic unity," Veltar said desperately. "What unity?" Rexo asked. "We have not been unified for years. We have been a collection of species that cannot agree on anything important. The Alliance has more unity in 6 months than we have achieved in decades." The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was becoming clear. Some species would remain loyal to the Council out of tradition or pride. Others would seek membership in the Alliance. The galaxy was dividing not between good and evil, between effectiveness and bureaucracy. On New Haven Colony, Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through the settlement that had been built by Kepler refugees with human assistance. Children from both species played together in the gardens that combined Kepler biotechnology with human engineering. Adults worked side by side in the workshops where new innovations emerged from the fusion of different perspectives. "Any regrets?" asked Dr. Ellen Price, the colony's chief administrator. Jake thought about the question seriously. 3 years ago, he had walked out of the council chambers in frustration and disappointment. He had ended humanity's participation in the most prestigious organization in the galaxy. "None," he said finally. "We spent 30 years trying to make the council work.
I know we're building something that actually does work."
Dr. Price nodded toward the bustling colony around them. "Think this is what the future looks like?" Jake smiled. "I think this is what the future should look like. People working together because they choose to, not because some bureaucracy forces them to. Problems getting solved by people who care about solutions, not by committees that care about procedure." The Free Systems Alliance was not perfect. An organization created by imperfect beings could be perfect. But it was effective, responsive, aligned with values that put people ahead of politics. The humans had walked away quietly from an organization that did not value their contributions. In that silence, they had found their voice and built something better than what they had left behind.